Hey friends, welcome back to Behind the Brim. Today, I'm thrilled to be joined by Brendan Barrack. He's a member and six-time club champion at Lambton Golf and Country Club, where he currently plays off a +3. I'm fortunate to call B a friend, and over the past few years, we played together in team formats as well as individually for our club championship. B was an academic All-American at George Washington University, where he recorded 2 NCAA collegiate wins. He turned pro off the back of his successful college career and recorded a professional win on the Great Lakes Tour as well. His golf reach would later extend to include caddying at the professional level and coaching as well. He currently holds the position of Vice President of Golf Management at Mindful Sports Group, where he represents tour players around the world. Some of their clients include Victor Perez, Ryan Ruffles, and Mike Lorenzo Vera, just to name a few. It's a real treat to have him with us today. B, thanks for joining us on Behind the Brim.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Really, really excited to have you here, man. You're such a pool of wisdom, and I think we're gonna really uncover a lot of good insights today. So, like we do with all our guests, B, can you explain to us how you got introduced to the game of golf that we both love?
For sure. It's a bit of a unique story, I guess. We were on a family vacation out east in Nova Scotia, New Brunswick. I think we were in New Brunswick at the time, and I was 5 years old, and my parents have 2 older brothers. They were looking for something to kill the time, and we grabbed a couple used clubs from Played Against Sports, and we're whacking it around a hydro field. And I sort of like still have kind of some memories, and I was just hooked immediately. And then simultaneously back in Toronto, my parents were trying to get into golf, and we joined Lambton and sort of took the journey from there. And we sort of all took the game up as a family at the same time. So no one really had we were all kind of learning. And I think me being the youngest person in the family, that probably gave me the biggest advantage, just because, the early exposure is a big thing in golf for sure. Cause it's such a complex game, and the earlier you can get exposed to it, you're probably better off in the long run. So I benefited from that, and Lambton is phenomenal because it has a 9-hole short course, and they sort of dangle the carrot in front of you of you're not allowed to play the 18-hole course until you can get your scores low enough on the 9-hole course. And I think that alone was like huge incentive for me as like a 10-year-old to I got to shoot my 85s to qualify to play the full 18-hole course. And I remember my first time playing the 18-hole course. It was honestly a great way to bring kids into the game, and I'm very fortunate for that. And so that's sort of how I got involved in golf. And I think a lot of listeners and like yourself, Cam, young age guys like us, we got a club in our hands, and that's kind of it.
Yeah, it's crazy, dude. You get the club in your hands, you just feel the solid contact off the face, and you just never look back. There's just, it's an indescribable feeling. You start making contact, you see the ball fly, and for some of us, it just flips a switch, and we're off to the races. I never want to stop doing this.
100%. I actually started as a lefty because I played hockey left. So when I was 5 and just whacking the ball around, it was lefty. And then back in the mid 90s, they didn't really have left-handed ladies clubs, and they didn't have junior clubs yet. Other US kids wasn't a thing. So when my parents were getting us all clubs, they just bought a 9-iron, 7-iron, 5-iron, 3-wood set, and they were all right-handed. So I had to switch. And to your point, I remember that first range session with the right-handed clubs, and I was in tears, and just it was so uncomfortable. And then the one thing that stands in my memory so clearly is there was that 100-yard sign on the range, those wooden painted signs, and I hit a 5-iron and I flushed it. It was my last shot, and I hit the sign, and I was just oh my God, this is and then you say, that's all you need. I was hooked after that.
You're yeah, you know what? I'm going to do this for the rest of my life. I love this.
Exactly. Yeah, I'm gonna make a career out of this.
Well, B, you know how the format works for our podcast here. Our first section is the report card section. And so essentially we just want you to grade your game in the 4 primary areas of driving, iron play, chipping, and putting, and give us a grade A through F. And from there, we're just going to unpack your top 2 strengths, brother.
Sounds good. So I guess we'll start on the tee. Driving, it's probably one of my better my better skills, I would say, and not necessarily because I'm like Mr. in the fairway all the time, but I would say that I'm good at, if there's water on the left, I'm good at hitting it up the right. I'm good at managing my tee ball, I would say. So I would give that a B plus, A minus. My iron play can be good. I think situationally, my long iron play is probably my biggest strength of my irons, but overall the iron play is decent. I'm prone to the odd, offline shot, as we all are. And something I really, one of my goals for this season is to improve my distance control and really sort of dial that in. So my iron play, I would give it just probably a flat B. Around the greens, I feel very comfortable. I have the knowledge of how to play all the shots. Doesn't mean I always pull them off, but I think there's a lot of experience really comes into play around the greens, and there's a lot of subtle setup adjustments that a good player needs to make to hit some of the more trickier shots around the greens. And I'd say I'm pretty good at that, and I'm pretty good in the bunkers. And my touch of my feel may not be the best, but I think my technique and my strike around the greens is usually pretty good. So I'll give that a B plus, A minus as well. And then putting, it's sort of I can be a great putter, like most people. My lag putting is something I used to struggle with, and now I think I've sort of figured out the formula for lag putting, and I actually think my lag putting is now one of my strengths. For sure, one of my biggest weaknesses as a golfer is my short putting. My 3 to 6 foot range is a hard D, and my overall putting, I'll give it a B minus. I'd love to, every year my goal is to be better from 3 to 6 feet, and for whatever reason, I'm still struggling, still trying to find the answer to be just nails from inside 6 feet. But maybe this is the year.
Definitely the year. So that was a good comprehensive outline there, B. So what I'm hearing, we got driving as a strength, we got greenside play as a strength, and then I'm going to touch on lag putting just in our wrap up at the end. But let's get it. I mean, and also for our listeners, like I played, I don't know how many rounds with you, so many rounds with you, and like that checks out. Like I consider, like, to your point, you rarely miss the ball into a spot where it's a 2-shot swing. Like it seems like you're always in play, and like greenside, you do have great hands. So I want to unpack both of those. Let's start with driving. We lead off the hole with the big stick.
Yeah.
So give me some of your fundamentals for successful driving.
For sure. First and foremost, and we've talked about this a lot, is having a really good pre-shot routine. I think that especially on the tee, because it's the one shot in golf that you can kind of recreate in practice, that in it being, it's on a tee, it's a flat lie, you kind of know what you're getting when you're pulling out the driver, in the sense of, everything around you, every hole is different, and the wind is always different, and what you're trying to do on that hole is always different. But just from a driving standpoint, the name of the game is consistency, for sure. Everyone wants length and accuracy, and there's no shortage of information about how to swing it faster, and we all want to be more accurate. But I think a good pre-shot routine really sets the stage for your hole, and for your round, and especially for your driving. And so I think just having a consistent routine that you can repeat, and it doesn't matter what it is, as much as it matters that it's the same every time. And like anything in life, like these routines, you sort of build up a bit of a habit, and the more comfortable you get with your routine, the more like every tee ball you're hitting just feels the same, and you can kind of work from there. You know what I mean? If you've got that same pre-shot routine, by the time you're ready to pull the trigger, you're over it. You kind of feel comfortable. When I've executed my routine, I'm standing over the ball, and I've got a good target in mind, sort of things calm down a little bit for me, and I sort of can just allow the swing to happen naturally, and I don't have to manipulate anything too much, and I don't have to think about anything too much. It's just kind of on autopilot at that point. So I'd say that a routine for me is probably, and for all golfers, is something that is massively beneficial for all shots, but especially for driving.
So walk us through your routine, B. I know you mentioned it can be different for each person, but give us an example of like what your standard routine looks like.
For sure. I don't put in terms of practice swings, I don't put a number on practice swings. Some days I don't take any practice swings. Some days I'll take 3 or 4. That part of the routine I sort of leave outside of the routine. But whenever I take my practice swings, or if I have a good feeling, I don't feel like I need any practice swings, whatever it is, by the time I'm ready to start my routine, I'm standing behind the ball, looking down the fairway at my target. And from there, I'll kind of line up the target with my shaft and sort of cover the ball and my target, and just to get an aim point. And then I'll draw a line down to a sort of like intermediate target on the ground, 3, 4, 5 feet in front of the ball. And then from there, I'm very specific about how I walk into the shot, into my setup. So in my head, I'll say, when I put my right foot down, I'll say right. And then I'll put my left foot down, I'll say left. And then right foot, left foot. And then, so it's right, left. And at that time, I've kind of swung around to like be facing the ball, and then left, right. And I kind of waggle a little bit. And then I'm there. Like, you know, I mean, that's then the old friend's there. And from there, I'm not even really sure what I do. I know I have a few like idiosyncrasies of like, I think I like press on the shaft a little bit, and all that stuff's not conscious. It's just sort of just ingrained in me at this point. But it's really about that, like making sure I take the exact same number of steps into the ball every time. And I actually say in my head out loud, left, right, just because it helps me become more present and more into the moment, and less about like, don't hit it left, like, or, you know, like, oh, you know, you've hit the last 3 left, like, you know, make sure you don't do that again this time. You know, you don't want to be thinking anything like that. You just really want to be in the moment. And that's what I do on the range to practice. And so when I'm on the tee, it's very much recreating that exact practice. And, you know, you're just trying to make it as familiar as possible. And that's sort of the recipe for me, is to just have a very specific number of steps, very specific number of waggles, and a very sort of specific way of getting into my setup.
Yeah, I think that's such a good call out. Like, and watching you play, it is you walk into the ball the same way. And anybody who watches the PGA Tour, like if you watch the guys, they walk into the same way every time. Each player has their own unique way of doing it. But I think that's something that's often slept on. Like, consistency starts before you make the golf swing. It starts like behind the ball. And you mentioned picking a target in the distance and then an intermediate target. How specific are you with your targeting in the distance? Are you picking a small target like a tree, or are you picking like a quadrant of the fairway? Like, what does that look like?
I've heard a lot of people, like Fred Funk, who was one of the most accurate drivers of the golf ball probably ever. He would always talk about, like, he picked a specific mower cut that he was trying to land the ball on. I, for whatever reason, have never responded to like that specific of a target off the tee. And maybe I would benefit from it if I applied myself more down that direction. For me, like we talked about, my biggest focus, because I'm pretty good out of the rough, is just making sure that I've got a stance, a lie, and a swing on my approach shot. And so it's really just avoiding trouble and playing to the fat side of the hole off the tee as best you can. I mean, some holes are very difficult, and you have to hit the fairway, and those are the moments when the routine is super important. And, you know, that's sort of how I handle the tougher tee shots as well, is just going back to that routine. But in terms of aiming, I'm usually just favoring aiming, you know, just inside the rough on the safe side of the hole. I'm not being too specific with my like long range target, but my intermediate target, you know, I'll pick a sort of general long range target, but wherever I am picking, then I use the shaft to create that straight line to my intermediate target, you know, 4 or 5 feet in front of me. And so the long range target off the tee isn't necessarily the most specific for me, but the intermediate target is, you know, it's like a tiny little speck on the grass. And you just kind of lock into that for alignment of your club face and your stance, and just making sure, you know, all your lines nothing's conflicting. You know, there's no sort of shoulders aiming one way, feet aiming another way, hips aiming another way. Yeah, club face is aiming at 5th direction. You know, you see a lot of that, and you know, any good player can take one look at a golfer who's all crossed up at setup, and just you don't even need to watch them hit the ball. You just know it's not going to turn out well. So it's really just about eliminating all that conflict, making sure everything's just aligned, and then I've gotten into the shot with my routine.
I know you mentioned you don't have a lot of swing thoughts, but can you take us there? Like take us behind the brim. Like, what's going on in your head as you're maybe taking your last look and you're about to pull the trigger? What's going on there?
For sure. Like, usually with swing thoughts for me, I'm well past the days of trying to change my swing. I think my motor pattern is pretty ingrained. I'm always trying to be better with my fundamentals, and some of that is I have bad habits in my swing. Like, I kind of roll the club face open in my backswing, and I'm fighting and I kind of suck it inside, and those are things that have been a 10-year battle for me. And you have to be realistic too, that's probably just my movement pattern, and to get away from that too severely would probably not help my performance. But there's always, usually I'm trying to check myself on those things. So for me, it's like maybe usually like a takeaway feel, or just some sort of just trying to get the club a little bit more outside my hands in the first part of the backswing, or just trying to keep the club face more stable and keep my hands a little bit more passive. Those are sort of the feels that I have. Like, I'm really not a big fan of the get my trail right elbow tight to my rib cage, and you could get very complex very quickly, and all that stuff takes you out of the present. And I find I have a lot more success when I'm focused on the target side of the shot than I am in the backswing, downswing side of the shot. So that's kind of my so I think most players, people can say they don't have swing thoughts, and you don't have to attach language to it, for sure. And probably attaching language to it is the worst thing you could do in a lot of cases. But usually I'll have a feel, a takeaway feel, or something that I'm trying to, I don't want to say do in my swing, but just some sort of tendency that I'm trying to guard against, I would say. And, I have my little feels that I can go to. I know if I'm overhooking it, I can try to just feel a bit more of a cut path. And I know if I'm fading it too much, I can feel a little bit more in and out, and just stuff like that. But in terms of living off of feels, I don't really do it. I think that a good routine and a good focus on the target should take care of the rhythm aspect of it. If you're present, you don't really have to focus on rhythm, or at least I don't. It kind of just flows from there. So I would say that minimal, it's fine to have a feel, but you don't want to get in the thoughts too much. I think swing thoughts is it's a very popular terminology in golf, but I don't necessarily think it's always the most beneficial thing to be thinking about your swing, as opposed to just sort of just feeling it a bit.
Dude, I think that's such a good call out, on the sense of I'm just relating a story. When I was in grade 12, I took some lessons from Jim Flick, who was Jack Nicklaus's, the late Jim Flick. He was Jack Nicklaus's coach in his later years and stuff. And I was always a very cerebral player. I was always thinking. I was very analytical, and I was thinking words. And he would sit in front of me on the range, and he'd tell me I can see that you're thinking words in your head, but I don't want you to think any words, no conscious thought. He's to your point, he preferred a feel. So if somebody's hitting a slice, the feel of releasing the hands and turning it over, he didn't want words in your head, and he wanted also an awareness of the target in your mind's eye. And I think that's brilliant, dude. That's so important to call out. I don't think many good players over the ball are thinking words. I think it's just more a feeling of this pattern moving towards the target is kind of what the majority of good players are doing.
100%. And I think when I'm playing my best, and I think probably for you and for a lot of players, it's you really when you have those rare moments when you're really playing at a high level, you're almost focused on your starting trajectory. You can almost feel before you take the club back how it's gonna come off the club, and you're kind of living in that area, as opposed to how you're gonna move. I think thinking about how to move, and then attaching language about how to move, bend my red, if I go for a run, I can't tell you what my calf is doing, and I don't need to tell you what my calf is doing. I'm just trusting that I've built up enough motor pattern of running that I can rely on that. And certainly, you could clean up your form, if I need to get my posture a little bit better, like I can do that. But like I don't need to think like, align my posture, align my thoracic spine over my lumbar spine, and like it's like that's just
Totally.
So it's very feel based, and you can use words to discover your feels, but like once you get them, like don't try to explain them to anyone, and don't try to like that's when you go wrong. And if you try to like, oh, what are you working on, and it's just like, well, I'm actually working on like folding my right elbow in the backswing and making a smooth transition and loading into my left side in transition. It's like that's just, come on, like you're already gonna hit a bad shot.
Yeah, no, dude, that's powerful stuff. And I think like for someone who's maybe newer to the game or a little earlier in the development, like at the beginning, some of it has to be conscious. Like if you have just a horrible motor pattern, like we're not saying that, oh yeah, you're going to have a beautiful swing and you're going to be able to just fire at the target. Like if you need to learn the movement, like everybody, like walking is a natural thing, but we still had to learn to do it. Like same with talking, like you have to consciously do it at the beginning.
Yeah.
But once you get to a point where I think a lot of listeners are at, where they have a pretty natural pattern and they're fairly athletic and they're maybe just handcuffing themselves by attaching language, it's at that point that you start to feel things more and you start to make it more athletic and focus on, like you said, the second half of the swing, which is, contact forward towards the target. Like you throw a baseball, everybody can throw a baseball. We're just thinking about, okay, where's the glove that I'm throwing it to? Okay, bang. Or you're on a breakaway with a hockey puck. Like we're just looking for the opening, and that's where we want to fire it. Or a tennis shot, we're looking at the place in the court where that's open. Like to take the athletic instincts from other sports and apply them to golf, which is a static sport. I think we all get a lot of benefit from that. I think that's fair to say.
For sure. And that's not to say that there isn't a place for learning and acquiring information about technique and improving that. I think, as you say, like the difficulties with players like yourself who are cerebral, your brain works and it works very well. And, it can be a very useful tool if you're writing an exam or solving a very complex problem. In athletics, it can also be a useful tool for, finding your weaknesses and really thinking outside the box over how to improve. But at the end of the day, in the moment when you're making the shot, that part of your brain isn't really going to help you out very much. And so, it comes back to target connection for me pretty much always, and just trying to make the game point and shoot as much as possible.
Love it, P.
Which is easier said than done. Let's be clear about that too.
Take me to the range. Our listener has 20 minutes to work on their driver. What's one drill that you'd suggest they try, or something that you've done in the past that has helped you?
For the driver, when I practice it, it's very much routine based. That's the thing that I practice the most with the driver, is just making sure that my routine is just ironclad and will not change no matter how nervous I am. In terms of drills, one drill that I've gone to from time to time is a drill that Tiger used to do way back in the day and sort of swing it at like 20% speed. I find that with the driver, especially because the club is so long, it can pull you into a lot of really bad positions. And I think that just slowing it down to where you're, maybe only hitting your driver 80 yards, but just, really feeling each sequence of your swing and just sort of how the club is loaded and unloaded without any speed, and then just gradually building that up to a full swing, I find to be very helpful, really from the standpoint of when you think about driving, it's different from irons because you're trying to sweep the ball off the tee. And it's my favorite thing to tell beginners when they're hitting their driver is to just, that's all I want them to feel is the feeling of sweeping the ball off the tee. So you don't want to be hitting way down on it. You can hit up on it. Most people can't hit too much up on it, so that's less of a concern. But really just trying to like match the ground on the way through, and be nice and level, or shallow would be the word that golf people use. But really, you're just trying to sweep the ball off the tee, and to the extent that any golfer can, go to the range and practice sweeping the ball off the tee, I think that is probably the most useful way. And I'm hesitant to tell anyone how to do that because everyone's movement strategies are unique to them. But I think that's the ultimate goal of driving, is to just have good contact and sweep the ball off the tee with, a club face that's pointed generally in the direction of where you want it to go. So slowing things down, and really you can feel very quickly when you slow your backswing down, like where you go wrong. The club might start to feel heavy, or your brain might tell you like, oh, this feels out of position. And you can, kind of just make your own adjustments and self-correct. I think that's probably the best driving tip I could use. I could give someone. The other one I'd say too is if you are struggling with the driver, choke up on it. Like, grip it right down to the end of the grip and feel a bit of a shorter driver in your hands. And I think a lot of the times that just sinks people back up, and then you can kind of, work back towards, full length driver shaft with the grip. And a lot of times that helps as well.
Dude, I love three great call outs there. Like going through your routine on every shot on the driving range. Like you can't expect to just show up on the golf course and put a fresh routine into play. Like you need to get those few reps on the range.
Yeah.
And like every time you tee up that ball, use that as a reset. Like you tee up the driver, step back and walk in. You don't need to take 3 practice swings, but like you said, just getting comfortable with the way of walking into the ball every time and targeting every time is like massive. Yeah. I love the choke down call out. Like, I'm a small guy, that I'm like 5'7". And so the standard driver these days is 45 inches long. I think like not that long ago, like we were working off a 43 or 43 and a half inch standard driver length. So I'm kind of like of the Anthony Kim, kind of setup where I choke everything down a little bit, and mostly because I'm shorter, but I also find that it gives me better control and I feel more comfortable, like you said, syncing everything up and finding fairways. So I love that call as well. And the smoother tempo to kind of like hit some off speed shots to really like dial in the sequencing. Yeah. Like is amazing as well. Like there's 3 things right there that are going to help.
For sure. The thing with the slow swings is that you'll find very quickly that you struggle to hit the center of the club face swing it slowly, which is like amazing to me, because it's there's an element where you're just loading the force and unloading it, and when you do it in full speed, you're more trained to like find the club face. But when you slow it down, you're not creating that like explosiveness, and that is a big element of it. And so you're kind of losing that in the slow swing, but what you're gaining is that heightened sensory perception of the sequence and how the club is unloaded into the ball. And it'll expose a lot of the times, like when I swing really slowly, it's very common for me to hit it off the heel with a wide open club face. And it's just like, whoa, I'm getting stuck here. Like I can feel it. And then I'm able to self-correct pretty quick. And the choke up thing, I think that's just a good tip for like all golfers. Like there's probably, you could go down the rabbit hole of the science behind choking up that, you're creating a counterweight on the end of the club. When Jack Nicklaus played with counterweights on the end of his clubs, and, Anthony Kim was pretty damn good at golf, and Brooke Henderson does it. And, there's a lot of players. I think for me, I always like when I can choke up on a club. I do it to take distance off a club, because it just, you reduce the club head speed by choking up on it. And but every time I do, you sort of feel like, oh man, I got so much more control now. So
no doubt,
just talking through it, maybe I'm gonna have to start choking up on the club a little bit more.
I love it, B. Well, I could chat your ear off on driver for another 30 minutes, but I want to get to short game. Yeah. So I'm going to throw the same thing at you. Give me some of your fundamentals for successful short game. And short game's pretty broad. There's different lies, different conditions like sand and greenside and all that. So let's just go basic chipping, and maybe you can speak to like chipping out of the fairway, chipping out of the rough, but keep things basic. What are some of the fundamentals you're looking for?
For sure. So basic chipping out of the fairway. The number one most important rule is to never have the ball either in the middle of your stance or back of middle of the stance. I think that's hands down number one, the most incorrect thing that is taught to people. And I understand why it's taught, because when you put the ball off your back foot and you lean the shaft way forward, you can basically ensure ball first contact. But what you're gaining in that security of ball first contact, you're losing in control. And that also only works on like certain grasses. Like if you're playing links golf, you can get away with chipping it out of the back of your stance. If you go down to Florida and you're playing on Bermuda grass, like have fun chipping out with the ball at the back of your stance. Like you're probably going to like hit it 3 feet in front of you, like like won't even make contact with the ball because the grain's just going to catch because you're coming in too steep. So the general principle with chipping is shallowness. And, you know, kind of like the driver, you really want to be sweeping the ball. And a basic chip is much closer to a putt than it is to a full swing. And I think a lot of people think of chipping as a mini full swing, and that's like a huge mistake that you can make. So I like to play the ball just inside my front foot. You know, I'm not saying you have to go that far up with it, but that allows me that guarantees I'm going to be shallow. There's no way I can like hit down on it with the ball up in my stance. I think so ball up is probably the fundamental. If you can be ball up with something that resembles a bit of a putting stroke, I mean, it doesn't have to be like an actual putting stroke because you're kind of like chipping, but very calm hands. And then the other thing is to just make sure you have good acceleration through the ball. So the biggest mistake you'll see the amateur golfer make is they'll put the ball too far back in the stance. They'll put too much of their weight forward. They'll lean the handle forward, and then they'll take too long of a backswing. And then it's like this like decel like chaos into the ball. And it's just like they got like, how on earth are you supposed to have any sort of touch like that? If the ball's up in your stance and you're very limited in your backswing, not hinging it or anything, but just like kind of like a putting backswing. From there, you can just have a nice, like consistent acceleration through the ball. You'll have a consistent trajectory, consistent contact, and then that's where your feel can develop from. You can't have any feel if you don't have consistent, launch on your chips and stuff. And then, the other thing is just from there, it's just club selection. Like I'm not really trying to change the chipping motion too much. If it's a longer chip, I'll just take more club or less loft, as I say. And I think that's kind of the easy formula for out of the fairway. And then out of the rough, it changes. And this is where short game is so tricky because there isn't one rule, one size fits all with short game. It's very situational. And over time, and as you gain experience as a player, you start to understand each situation calls for something else. But in the rough, if it's just a basic chip, now we are going to want to move the ball a little bit further back because sweeping it out of the rough isn't an effective strategy because now we're becoming victim to how much is the rough going to catch our club. So we really want to have a more ball first strike. And that's when you can get into the sort of ball in the middle of your stance, maybe even a little bit back of middle. When I'm in the rough, I chip it out of the middle just because I really don't like getting the ball too far back around the greens. And I like to take a bit more of a out to in path. Like I try to kind of cut and hit down on my shots out of the rough with the stable club face. So it is a bit of a complex motion in the sense that you're kind of holding off the club face through the shot as you're sort of cutting across it and hitting down on it. But that's the only way to sort of get that consistent strike out of the rough. And chipping out of the rough if there's one word to describe it, is inconsistent because every lie is different, and the better and more experience you get as a golfer, you get a little bit better at reading the lies. But making that subtle change to sort of, okay, now I don't want to be shallow. I want to be a little bit more steep. I'm going to move the ball back. I'm going to be a little bit more out to in and hold the club face. And then from there, understanding how the ball is going to react when it hits the green out of the rough. You're not going to spin it out of the rough. Maybe if you catch it high on the face and you get one of those like ones that is like freaky and like comes out with spins for some reason. But in general, you're just going to land it and understand that it's going to roll out. And you just want to prevent it from landing and shooting forward. I think that's the sort of thing you want to guard against. But if it can land and just run out naturally, I think that's what you want to do. Dude,
that might have been the best. That might have been the best like summary of chipping that like I've ever heard in my life. No, straight up like that. I think that was the best breakdown. Like Chandler and I have talked about this in one of our episodes, and I don't know the order of events and which is going to air first, but that's exactly what we talk about. Like, I think the biggest problem is, like you said, people are trying to catch ball first out of the fairway. They lean the handle, they put the ball back, and they put their weight forward. And it just, their margin for error is
zero.
Zero.
Yeah.
Like if they don't catch that perfect,
yeah,
they're going to catch it fat. The leading edge is going to dig into the ground, and they're going to roll the sod over it.
100%.
And like, you move that ball forward, you lean that shaft more vertical, like more up and down.
Yeah.
And now you're using the wedge like it's designed. There's bounce on there. It's going to be able to just skip through the ground. And if I want to hit it lower, like you said, I just grab less loft and I can apply the same principles. It's so good to hear like an elite player be like yourself sharing this approach, because more people need to or could benefit from applying it.
For sure. And you know, that's something that I learned over time too. Like I used to try to slice all my chips like when I was a kid, because I thought that's how you put spin on it. And there's a lot of bad information out there. And, you know, for the longest time on the Golf Channel, when we were kids, we would watch and they would tell you to get your hands ahead. And there's a lot of good chippers that don't even really know what they do. Like I watched some of those Phil Mickelson short game classes, and he's talking about this hinge and hold, and he's making it sound, to me, that sounds like dragging the handle. But if you actually watch his hands, he's not holding it, he's releasing it. And that's just him describing his feel. And he's actually doing what all the good chippers do, and which is, you know, delivering the club very neutral to the ball. And there's not a descending flow. He's very shallow. And, you know, he talks about getting his weight forward, but he's releasing the club, and he's just not saying that he's releasing the club. And yeah, I mean, how a guy does it versus how he feels like he does it is always, you know, that's sort of where a lot of golf instruction can go wrong, is that the feel isn't real, which is, you know, a very popular expression. But, you know, chipping is physics at the end of the day. It's geometry, and there is no ballistic ball flight, you know, so there's no sort of anything other than just getting a consistent delivery of the club into the ball. You know, I think those simple fundamentals are massively helpful for you know, most people, because I think that's easily the number one mistake I see when I play with you know less skilled golfers, is that you get them around the greens and they just don't have a prayer. And it's not from a lack of ability, it's just from a lack of, you know, you know, 20 handicappers can be great chippers. Like, it's not a complex motor skill. I think the general principle around the greens is you want to be shallow, and that's going to help you on all grasses. And it's going to help you control the spin. It's going to help you control the rollout. It's going to help you control the trajectory. And I mean, I think that ultimately you just want to get your short game into a place where you're just trying to feel it. And if you have a good setup, you can feel it. And if you don't, you know, it's like a thunderstorm in your head when you're over the ball. You're just guessing and decelling into the ball and chunking it or blading it. Any sort of that thing.
And we're gonna do a video where we sort of explain like what that basic setup looks like. Like, you did a great job of explaining it, but some people are visual learners, so just know that if you're listening, that's coming. In terms of like when you're chipping the ball well and you're actually about to pull the trigger, do you have any like chipping feels, or are you chipping to a target, like a spot that you've picked out? Like, how do you kind of go about chipping?
I don't pick a landing spot. I know a lot of people do. That's just not how my brain works in terms of how I feel a shot. Because what I always do, if I pick a landing spot, and I've played around with it over the years of like trying to land it on this specific spot, I'll always land short of the spot I'm trying to land it on, because from a young age, I've never trained that way. I've always just seen the hole and then responded to that. So I'm used to landing it short of where I want the ball to end up. You know what I mean? So if I'm now all of a sudden trying to land the ball on a specific target, I actually don't have any feel for how far precisely to carry it. I know some people have trained that way from the start, and if that's what you've done, I would say continue doing it. I'm not saying that picking a landing spot is a bad thing. I just think it's unique to the individual. And so for me, it's really just about letting that non-linguistic part of your brain connect to the target. So for me, when I'm chipping, I'm really trying to feel the strike in my practice swings more than anything, as opposed to thinking about how hard to hit it. And then when I'm ready and I feel like I'm getting in a good setup, then I'm looking at the hole. And when I look back down at the ball and I'm about to take the club back, my brain is actually over at the hole. And I try to take a picture of the hole in my brain, and like I can picture like one part of the hole, like if it's like the front edge, and I'm standing over it, and all I'm thinking about in my head is the front edge, because now I know my technique's good, and I'm just really trying to just connect to that front edge and how far I carry it, how much it runs out, how much it spins. I'm really not, I don't want to say I'm not concerned with it, but it's not really entering my frame of mind. It's more just about, you know, matching my backswing length and my acceleration to where I want the ball to ultimately finish up. And, you know, obviously if you've got not a lot of green to work with. You're probably, your landing spot is going to be close to the hole, and you're going to have to figure out how to get the ball high and to stop the ball with by it falling straight down. You've got a lot of green to work with. I think it's very beneficial to just have the hole in mind and just try to, react and feel, how am I going to get the ball to stop near the hole?
That's so cool, man. It's cool to hear like just a slightly varied perspective on chipping, because a lot of people we've spoken with go the landing spot route. But
sure.
what I think is neat is like if we threw like a stake down like 40 feet out, and I told you to underhand a ball to that stake, like I bet you a lot of people wouldn't pick spots. They would just, like you said, just instinctively just underhand the ball based on how far they're trying to hit it.
Yeah.
And I really like the comparison of like, if someone's saying, how hard do I hit a chip? Well, how hard would you underhand this from the fairway? Like,
yeah,
how low would you throw it? How high would you throw it? How would it release? Like, so I feel like you're really tapping into like some natural instincts there, which is really cool. And I actually think my dad, who's one of the better chippers I know, also does that. Like he just said, like, it's like, how hard you need to hit it.
Yeah.
You just take a couple of practice swings, feel it out, and then just hit that note of kind of tempo and acceleration.
Yeah. And the one caveat I would say is that feel is only developed from constant practice.
Yeah.
Chipping and putting, because they're fine motor skills and they're not gross motor skills, they deteriorate a lot quicker. So it's that basically means when you come out of the winter, if you haven't played all winter and it's spring and you're getting back in the game, your swing is it's going to feel weird for the first, maybe 20, 30 minutes of your range session, but your swing comes back pretty fast. I think what a lot of people notice when they come back from a long time off is they've got stone hands around the green. Yeah. It's got no feel, and it can take weeks to get your feel back. And that's just the reality of fine motor skills. High level concert pianists train hours and hours and hours and hours every single day just to maintain their level, let alone to improve. And I think that's, I see your dad, he's always working on his short game. Like for me, it's the most fun thing for me to practice a short game. And so I think that leads me to practice short game a lot, but it's also just an acknowledgement that like, you got to get your touches. Like we talk about it with the tour players, like putting up your free throws, you know what I mean? Like it's a very similar thing. Like NBA guys, like, Kobe Bryant would put up free throws all day long. It's not like he can't make a free throw, but it's a fine motor skill. And if you take 2 days off, you're going to deteriorate and you won't be as good as you were. And so you need to practice constantly to develop that feel and then to maintain that feel. And I think that's a huge element of short game is constant practice.
That's a great call out, man. The gross versus fine motor skills, like that's stuff that I haven't really breached, and that's cool to know. So I'm glad you called that out. And I mean, speaking of practice, let's just wrap things up with the short game with, if somebody's got 20 minutes to practice, they head on over to the practice green. What would you recommend they do, or what does your short game practice look like at this point?
I think the practicing a pitch shot is probably the most beneficial, because it's in many ways the most technically demanding, because there's a little bit more speed in the pitch shot. You're trying to carry it 20, 25 yards sort of thing. There's a lot more room for it to go wrong. And that's really when the ball in the back of the stance crowd struggles. And explain
a pitch, B, for our listeners, pitch first chip type of thing.
For sure. A pitch is a lot like the simple chip out of a fairway. You want the ball up towards the front of your stance. And you want to be shallow. The only change I would make with pitching is that you're probably opening the club face so that you're really exposing the bounce a little bit more, maybe than you would on a chip. On a chip, you may have a bit more of a square club face. Pitching for me, I like to open the club face and really just it's kind of the same as the simple chip out of a fairway. You can have a bit of a putting stroke, and really you got to make sure you have that constant acceleration through the ball. You're still trying to be shallow. I always try to think of like waist high to waist high when I'm pitching, so I don't, even on a long pitch shot, I don't want my hands to really get past waist high on either side of the shot. But if I can be nice and sort of passive with my hands back to waist high, and then a nice acceleration, and then stop. I think stopping your follow through around the greens is very helpful, because for a lot of the handle draggers, if they're forced to abbreviate their follow through, what they'll end up doing is releasing the club. just to get all the energy out of the club before they need to stop it. So maybe even if you are struggling with pitching, I would maybe even say like stop short of waist high, like waist high to just pass the ball. And if you can just get all the energy to just pass the ball, that'll help you release the club. And releasing the club, or not dragging the club through the ball is the key to pitching. When you see someone leaning the shaft into impact on a pitch shot, they're gonna struggle. It can be a little bit forward, but like it's like you don't want to be hitting down on it. You don't want to be. Some people take a divot. Divot's more about if the turf is soft, you can take a divot on a putt. But it's just more just about being super shallow and really managing how long your backswing is. Again, most people take way too big of a backswing on a pitch shot, and even if you have perfect setup, if you take too long of backswing, now you're decelling and all sorts of funny things are happening in the club, and you're not going to have a consistent strike. But if just short backswing, short follow through, and good acceleration, just try to stay very calm with your hands, not hinging, not holding. I think that's the key. Like honestly, it is like a putting stroke. I mean, it's the setup is different. You're not setting up to it like you would a putt, but the sort of motion is very much like a putting stroke that you're then really accelerating.
Dude, it's so funny because you and I haven't really talked about this before, this specific part of the game, but you and I approach it the exact same way. Like literally everything you're saying, I think that's maybe why it's kind of a strength of both of our games is we have pretty basic, like effective technique. And it's like, when I think about pitching, it's exactly like you said. I want to set up with the shaft kind of vertical. I don't want to be leading my hands. And like through the hit, I want the shaft to return to vertical. I don't want that big forward shaft lean that's going to dig and come out low and hot. Like I want it to just like, if I set up with the shaft kind of up my zipper and up the buttons on my shirt, I want to return the shaft to the same position. Exactly. Like I don't want a long, lazy backswing, and I want to accelerate and finish with like the club in front of my hands and body, which is like you said, hip to hip. Yeah. And passive is my favorite word. I even try to be passive in my full swing. Like I don't like to consciously manipulate like my hands. Like the thought of creating wrist cock, like Steve Stricker, one of the best in the world. Like he said, if I create all this wrist cock with the wedges, like then I have to uncock, and that like creates another variable. And talk about returning the shaft to vertical and not leading the hands. Like there's a video on YouTube of Rory doing a TaylorMade promo, and he talks about, he's like, my only thought is just to return the shaft back to vertical. Yeah. And it's like that, those keys that you just called out, B, I think that's the jumping off point to go into the 19th hole. Like if somebody goes and finds a 20-yard pitch shot out of the fairway, 30-yard pitch shot, and implements those three things, passive hands, vertical shaft, and waist to waist acceleration, you can't help but get better. It's just going to happen. Totally.
And the reason I say the pitch shot for practicing short game is it's A, the most difficult, it's B, probably the most used, and C, it's the sort of the foundation from which all other short game shots flow from, minus maybe like a bunker shot, because the setup is just completely different in a bunker. But if you can pitch the ball, I think if you don't have time to practice every other shot around the green before you tee off, I think hitting a couple clippy pitches before you go out and tee it up, I think, you feel like you can go out and do something on the golf course,
Dude, I love that. That's so gold. A couple nippers before you go out.
Get the feel and to have the confidence to know that you can do that, I think is huge, because then if you miss a green out there, like, oh man, like I got this.
No doubt. All right, B, let's get into the 19th hole. I got some questions for you.
All right.
Really quick, just high level. You mentioned your lag putting, and like for our listener, you're a greasy lag putter. You're so good. Like we were playing the Club C's a couple of years ago, and I remember it like it was yesterday. It was the 8th hole, 220-yard par 3, and you poured in like we were battling, and you poured in like it was a 40 or 50 foot like greasy slider, and it looked like you were at risk of 3-putting this, and you just poured it in the middle, and I like. Just like an uppercut to the to the head. Like it was such a good putt, and I had so much respect for it. So like, what are some of your keys for lag putting? Let's keep this brief, but hit me with it.
Well, first of all, I should say that you are someone I look up to with the putter in the hands. I think your putting is just the envy of many people that I know. So
come on,
I'll leave it at that. But for me, for lag putting, again, it comes back to I used to struggle with leg putting, and this is why I feel like it's a real strength now, because I've fixed the mistake that I was making for so many years. And when I was really competing is when my leg putting was actually the worst, and it's because I'd get over the leg putt and I'd start thinking, how hard do I hit this? And like that's probably the worst thought you could possibly have over a leg putt, because then now we're getting into language. Now we're getting into like trying to quantify how hard I need to like hit a putt. And really what changed for me in putting was an understanding of the rhythm of my putting stroke. And I used to take it back very slow and very long. And over the years, I've gone back to really trying to take the putter back quite quickly. And then just from there, just kind of relax and let the putter swing through. And having that steady rhythm is, I think, the first key to really good leg putting. None of this short back and accelerate, or none of this like long back and just ease into it. I think you want to be very assertive, very quick back, and then let it flow from there. You don't want to be gaining speed through the ball. You don't want to be losing speed through the ball. You just want to be consistently maintaining the speed of your stroke through the ball. So that's the first thing. And then the second thing is target connection. And much like the chipping, it's for me, I read the putt backwards from the hole to the ball. And so I'm standing over and I'm kind of watching the break. The ball, you've heard about a putt can break in, if you divide a putt into thirds, you know what I mean? So first third, second third, and third. The third, the part that's closest to the hole, is where the putt will be breaking the most, because the ball is moving the slowest. So it's most susceptible to the breaks on the green. So you read the most amount of break back from the ball. And then as you get closer and closer to the ball, the overall read of the putt becomes a lot straighter, because that's when the ball's got a lot of momentum. So I read a ton of break in the final third, and then a little bit less in the second third. And then it's almost like a straight putt in the first third. And then from there, I picked up something from Jason Day that I've kind of implemented, and Cam Smith sort of has his own way of doing this as well, too. Probably the best putters in the world. Cam looks at the hole and takes one really, really good hard look at the hole before he gets back and does his leg putt. And Jason Day, when he's looking at the hole, his awareness is on the ball, and then he looks at the ball and his awareness is on the hole, and then he looks back and his awareness goes back to the ball, and he's just literally just connecting those two in his mind. And then so when I'm over a leg putt, I do all that. I'll kind of really look at the hole, and then I'll look back down at my ball, and then really my mind is now it's back at the hole, and I'm just picturing that piece of the hole that I was staring at so hard, and I know I've set up to the correct break, or what I think is the correct break, so I'm not worried about the line anymore. And I'm just over the ball, and I'm just picturing the hole, and then as long as I have that good rhythm, for me, I just find that my brain sorts it out. Like the less interference, the better. And I only hit bad leg putts when I get in my own way psychologically. Every now and again you have the wrong read and you catch a slope and you don't hit a good leg putt, but that's golf. But for the most part, it's really just about connecting to the target and just really having that spatial awareness. And the thing I always say to people is like, where did you park your car? And they can look at you and point to where they parked the car. It's like we have the ability to maintain a secondary target in our brains, even if we're not looking at it. And that's the key with the leg putting. And so if I'm looking at the ball, my eyes may be looking at the ball, but my mind is really connected to where the hole is. And I'm just trying to make the ball go there. Like it's kind of hard to describe, but it's really just really locking in on the hole and letting my brain sort it out. And that's achieved through a consistent rhythm on the putting stroke.
That's so good, B. That's like such good feedback. Like keeping the target in your mind's eye. Like, and I'll be honest, I feel like I didn't realize we had so many parallels in our game, but I also approach it in like the exact same way. Like as I'm taking my practice stroke, I'm looking at the hole to like calibrate distance. But when my eyes come back to the ball, I still have like the hole in my mind's eye. Like that's my intention. It's almost like Tiger, his dad telling him putt to the picture. Like I have that picture in my mind of like what I want to do. And I love your way that you phrase things. Like I don't want any interference to get in the way of like me rolling this ball on sort of that image that I just saw. It's like really, I think there's that's kind of it for putting. Like we could go further, but that's going to simplify it for a lot of people.
For sure. It's like daydreaming, you know what I mean? Like if you're just sitting at your desk and you're staring off into space and your mind is somewhere else, and you're not even seeing what's right in front of you, because the visual part of your brain is somewhere else. And it's the same thing. It's, you can be or looking at the ball, but you want to be daydreaming about the hole, and
Totally.
and that's just how your brain works. And that's what's going to give you the best chance at hitting a good lag putt.
You're in the unique position where like you're around pros week in, week out, like the best players in the world. What's one thing that, myself, our listeners, we can learn from these players to help them improve their own game?
I'll give you two things. The first thing is attention to detail. I think, and that's easy for pros to do because it's their livelihood, and also they have a ton of experience, and the details is where they separate themselves from their competition. But just in general, like, having a good setup. Like, the best players in the world spend more time working on the things that the average golfer has no interest in working on, like maintaining a consistent setup, good posture, good alignment, good aim, ball position, grip. Like Scotty Scheffler was warming up with a grip master. This is the time. He's not the number one ranked. He's number 2 in the world now, but he wasn't the number 1 ranked player in the world. Is warming up for his round of golf, practicing his grip. And like, that's the attention to detail that the top players have. And they to use the expression, they brush and floss their teeth. Like they do all of the monotonous, boring things that are going to help them be more consistent on a day-to-day basis. I think that to the extent that any amateur, and especially the better amateurs, can really lock in on these details and going through your routine on every shot on the driving range, not just raking balls and playing swing. And if the ball's above your feet, you're going to lose a couple yards of carry distance on your approach shot, or if it's below your feet, you're probably going to gain a couple yards. It's going to fade if it's below your feet. It's going to draw if it's above your feet. If it's cold, the ball's not going to fly as far. Like, all these little things that, aren't that complex, but they're just acquired through experience. Like, these are the things that the top players really focus on. And then for amateurs, high-level amateurs that are competing, sleep, nutrition, what you're eating on the golf course, managing your blood sugar spikes, and all that stuff is what the pros are on to these days. It's a very, very, very fine-tuned game that these pros are playing, and that's where the difference is. And then the second thing I would say is a psychological element. Like, I'm always amazed when you watch the best players. Yeah, they get hot under the collar and some of them slam clubs, but they're by and large very good at accepting shots that even guys like you and me would be upset hitting, and they don't get too down on themselves for a mediocre shot. I think they understand the importance and the value of hitting it to 35 feet. Whereas I think a lot of amateurs will hit it a 7-iron at 35 feet and be like, oh man, like, I just need to fix my swing. And it's like, that's like tour average, man. Like, that's like, really, if you did that every time, like, you'd be a really good player. And so I think it's just living and accepting that sort of non-perfection is something that good amateur golfers can really benefit from. I think back to my amateur days and playing the Ontario Amateur and the Canadian Amateur, and you just see so many temper tantrums out there that you don't see in professional golf. And people will always point to like that Keith Mitchell clip, or like even John Rahm is like, he gets hot under the collar, but he's usually hot under the collar about some sort of outside thing. He's rarely hitting a 5-iron to 45 feet and being disgusted with himself. Tiger Woods is the king at twirling the golf club and it ends up 25 feet from the hole. Like, they're very good at understanding what the standard is and not expecting too much of themselves. And I think that over the long haul of a round, of a tournament, of a season, that sort of stuff pays off huge. And it's just, steady on the rudder and sort of, you want to hit every shot as well as possible, but at the same time, you have to understand that golf is a very difficult game. And I think the pros understand how difficult golf is probably better than everyone else, which is kind of ironic, but that's one of their keys is that they know sometimes that 2 under was good because they were in the afternoon wave and the greens were bad and it was windy and it was, and they know that 2 under in the morning isn't necessarily good because, they should have taken advantage of the par 5s. There was no wind, fresh greens, like all that stuff. So I think just living and understanding that, boring golf is good golf, and, you don't have to be hitting it to 6 feet all day to put together a 65. I think that's probably one of the big things that the pros are very, very good at.
Two of my takeaways, just hearing you share there, the first one on like the nutrition piece, I think that, and the hydration piece, like, I think when I was younger, I don't I don't think I understood the importance and like the impact it can have on the golf course. Like you round the turn, you grab a chocolate bar and a hot dog and a Gatorade and you're off to the races on the back nine and you wonder why you flamed out on 15.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, you just put junk in your body and you spiked your blood sugar. Like there's no way you're finishing that round with any semblance of like balance and strength. So the last handful of years I've gotten older, it's like hydration is like number one. And then it's like sustaining, like you said, my blood sugar level is like, I read this book called Hole in One Nutrition. The founder of one of the guys on the board of the TPI organization, he basically said PFF, protein, fat, fiber.
Yeah.
He said if we can get snacks with some protein, some fat, some fiber, like a peanut butter and a banana sandwich or some nuts or a protein bar, or just different things that can check those boxes with the hydration piece, like you're going to sustain your play like well into the back nine.
For sure.
So like that to me is like a really cool call out. And then the second piece around expectations, like this one hits home for me as well, because when I was younger, you know, you hit a few loose shots and I'm like, okay, I got to retool my golf swing. Like it felt like almost every round I was yo-yoing on my golf swing. Like you said, you hit a 7-iron and maybe you missed the green, or you hit it 1 to 50 feet and you're like, it's my technique. Like I need to get to a point where I'm robotic. And until I do that, I'm going to keep trying new swing, new swing fads.
Yeah.
And like, I read a book once, it was like George Knudsen's book. And he talked about like, if you're comfortable in like the principles that you're applying and you have I guess your expectations are kind of level, you're going to have not only like physical balance, but like mental balance. So like, you're not questioning after every shot. It's just like DJ says, he's like, I don't get fussed when I hit bad shots because I hit them all the time.
Yeah.
He's like, I hit them all the time, man.
Yeah. It's an understanding that golf is a complex game and perfection is unattainable in golf, and you can strive for it. And if you're a perfectionist, that can help you to a point before it starts to hurt you. But yeah, it's just being comfortable with the fact that golf is not an easy game, and adaptability is a big thing. Being able to adapt to ever-changing conditions, I think is something the pros do really, really well. The nutrition piece, they're really good at doing all of the things that allow them to be as repeatable as possible. And repeatability is the name of the game. And so if you're tinkering constantly, you're hurting your repeatability. If you're, if you're changing your lofts on your clubs every round, like, you're hurting the repeatability of your distance control. If like there's so many things. If you're changing your technique every swing, like, if I asked ChatGPT what the key to golf, I said in one word, what is the key to golf? And it said consistency. And to me, that is repeatability, right? And I think that there's a lot of golfers and probably a lot of high-level amateurs that can do everything with a golf ball that John Rahm can do with a golf ball, or that Rory can do with a golf ball, or that Tiger in his heyday could do with a golf ball, maybe outside of how hard they hit it. But like in terms of, a lot of people can hit high draws and low fades and, hit nippy spinners and bump and runs and great bunker shots. Like, there's a lot of guys in the world that have all of the individual skills to be a great player, but where they fall short of the best players in the world is how many times out of 10 do you do it? You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. I think that's probably where the pros are the best at, and that's where the details come in. If you want to achieve that high level of repeatability, you got to kind of make sure you have all the boxes ticked before you pull the club back. And the more boxes that you can tick, and, the more you can control your own consistency of emotion, of thinking, of routine, you're going to get more consistent results. And I think that's the number one thing every golfer should be striving for. And it's not talked about enough in instruction is, everyone wants to hit the high bomb, but if I can only hit one high bomb out of 10 drives and the other 9 are retees, I don't want to hit the high bomb. If I can hit the fairway at a reasonable length 10 times out of 10, I'm going to be a pretty damn good golfer, as is anyone. No doubt. And so that's it's just repeatability, consistency, whatever word you want to use. Like, that is the real key. And that's why the details matter. That's why the blood sugar matters. That's why the hydration matters, and the sleep, and, all the things that you can control, especially around competition. I mean, I get, like, people are having fun rounds. Like, it's just, you're not going to be as dialed in on the details. But if you want to play your best golf, I would say that you absolutely have to really, take it up a notch and don't accept that sort of mediocre kind of willy-nilly approach to your golf. Like, I think you should really try to pay attention to every detail that you know of and try to learn of new details that how they can improve. And ultimately, the name of the game is repeatability. And I think if you keep that in your mind, I think that is what the best players in the world do, and it's what we're all striving to do. And I just want to hit as many shots out of 10 the same. The closer I get to 10 out of 10 being the same, the better a player I'll be.
I love it, B. 2 more questions, and we're going to get you out of here. First one, give me the craziest or the coolest thing you've seen on a golf course.
Ooh. Coolest thing I've seen on a golf course.
Or craziest. Like, I can't believe I saw that.
I mean, there's so many like individual like things where I've seen guys fly. I was playing with Victor. We were playing at Isleworth, and he flew the 11th green, like airmailed it with his iron, and it ended up in the water short of the green, which I thought was like pretty hilarious. It like he had a lot of spin on the ball, and it caught this like fringy area on like a huge slope, and it just like hit it, and it like spun, and then it just kept going all the way into the front water. And I was just like, man, like that was one club too many, and you came up in the water short. Like, I mean, stuff like that. Like, there's a million of those. Like, the craziest thing I've seen on the golf course. Like, I don't even know.
Like, you played on the mini tours. Like, you must have seen somebody just do like, what is this guy thinking?
To be honest, it's probably me that's done the craziest thing that I've seen on the golf course. I took a 13 in PGA Tour Canada Q School one year en route to like a 91. I was in the hazard short of the green, elevated green like above me, and I was in this like muddy water lie. It was in the mud, it wasn't in the water, and I thought I'd play it. And I tried to play it, and it rolled back to my feet, and I tried again. And like the crazy part is that like I hit it like 5 more times before I like finally realized I could get out, and like went back to the drop zone. And it's like, I mean, that's just a perfect example of how like nerves and pressure can impair your logical thinking, and you're hoping for the best outcome as opposed to like realistically planning for what is the outcome going to be, and it's kind of wishful thinking. And I mean,
a little bit of a little tin cup situation there.
Yeah, I guess. I mean, I've seen some people hit some crazy shots, man. Like at Lambton one time, for anyone that knows Lambton, the pro shop's right beside the first tee. I watched one guy hit it into the pro shop off the first tee, which is almost like directly to the right of the tee. That was pretty crazy. So yeah, I mean, it's huge. Oh, no, I got it. Okay, I remember. I used to caddy at the National Golf Club of Canada, and this is actually probably my favorite golf story. And I'm caddying with this guy. He's awful. He like probably couldn't break 130 on a good day. And he's a member at the National because it's the toughest course in Canada, and he's like an ego guy. And he sets up to it, and he hits a 3-wood between his legs, like between his own legs. He hits a 3-wood, and without missing a beat, he like stops and he hands me back the club, and we're walking up, or like walking left to his ball, and he goes, oh, man, "This course is tough." And like I just like remember thinking, I think I was like 17 or 18 at the time, being like, "Yeah, man, it's the course." Like, or here's a guy that's just got no clue. But anyways, strap
on a pair of shin pads and a hard helmet.
Yeah. I mean, you learn as a caddy to stand behind the golfer, not stand in front of them.
Oh, that's so good. Well, last one, B. If I could take you back to when your game wasn't as proficient, this could be 5 years ago, 10 years ago, whatever strikes you. What advice would you give to your former self to help expedite your improvement?
Stop searching as much, I would say. I think I was a big victim of that, of getting away from the repeatability element of golf and getting into the, like, what is the ideal? And the reality is the ideal is probably not the most repeatable. When TrackMan first came out, I really got obsessed with like zeroing everything out because like, I thought I understood, ball flight and all this stuff. And I just figured like, oh, if I can just zero out my face and path, like I'll just hit nothing but straight shots and, away I'll go. And it turns out like, I've got some problems in my right shoulder. I've got some problems in my left hip and, blah, blah, on and on and on. And zeroing out is like almost impossible for me, you know?
Yeah.
And so it's like, if I knew earlier in life to stop chasing that like 0-0, or even if it's someone's just trying to hit tight draws, and like, you know, if you can do it consistently, I'd say go for it. But like, don't chase something just because you think it's like ideal, you know? I would say be very practical. Like, what is your ball flight? What is your, you know, what is going to give you the best chance of hitting that shot that you just hit 10 times out of 10? And the more you can go in that direction, the more I could have gone in that direction when I was younger, the better off I would have been. And hopefully going forward, I'll continue to improve, because, you know, that's where my focus is. But for sure, stop tinkering as much. And then start addressing the psychology of the game more too. The technique is only going to take you so far. If you are not present, if you're, you know, sometimes if you're just not trying to make things happen, if you're just trying to wait for them to happen, that's bad too. You know, you got to, each shot requires you to hit the shot, and, you know, don't be afraid to own the moment, and don't be afraid to live in the present, and don't be afraid to do your best on the shot. And then when you do, just know that you're taking a good approach into the shot, whether it's your good routine, if it's your focus on repeatability, if it's, you know, your good target connection, all these things that we know can help us play better golf. You know, I think that ultimately the name of the game is get into the shot and be completely focused on what you're doing at the time. No interference in your head, no interference in your body, and away you go, and live with the result. I think that's, you know, it's a lot easier to accept taking a drop after hitting it in the water if you were trying to hit it in the fairway than it is to take a drop after hitting the water trying to not hit it in the water. You know what I mean?
Totally.
And so just that sort of presence and that focus on where you want the ball to go and what you want to do, I think is the thing that I would tell myself, you know, focus on that. Don't focus on trying to, you know, 180 ball speed with, you know, hitting 5 up on it and, you know, all this like stuff that I can't do consistently.
I love that, man. Well, B, I mean, I can't thank you enough for your time, and I know you got a lot going on right now, so really appreciate you carving out this window for us, and also want to plug your business, you and your partner's business. So if people are curious to just learn more about Mindful Sports Group, like, where can they find you? Where can they learn more about what you guys got going on?
For sure, mindfulsportsgroup.net is our website. But in general, our players are Victor Perez, Mike Lorenzo Vera, Goodmunter Christensen. Those guys are on the DP World Tour. On the Korn Ferry Tour, we have Pontus Nyholm, Tim Whiting, Wilson Bateman, Chris Baker. On the PGA Tour, we have Michael Gligic. And then we've got some guys on the Challenge Tour, and sort of Ryan Ruffles is going to be playing in Europe here and coming up. And we're always trying to find good young players. We're not a big agency, so we lean on a lot of analytics for our scouting, and a lot of our experience is, you know, people that have spent a lifetime in the game in terms of assessing talent. And so if you're thinking about turning pro, definitely I'm always here to chat about, you know, pathways to get to the PGA Tour. I think that's a big thing that a lot of people don't understand. And you know, and just having a professional approach to your game, I think, is something that we really focus on. And it's, you know, we started with Victor. He was playing on the Challenge Tour. And, you know, he's been in the top 50 in the world for a 2-year stretch. He's 60th in the world right now. He's won 3 times around the world at the highest level, and he's only getting better. And I think that, you know, he was our first client, and the approach that we've taken with him has caused a lot of other good young players to come on board. And I think we're going to be adding more players soon. And we're focused on performance, and we just want to help committed golfers to achieve their potential, because it's very, very hard to achieve your potential in this game, which is, I think, is the reason for this podcast, to help us all get closer to that potential. So, you know, that's sort of our business and what we do. And so, yeah, check us out and have an open door policy. If you know Cam, you know, and you want to get in touch with me, by all means, Cam, you can give him my number. I'm happy to chat with anyone that's interested in turning professional.
Love it, B. And yeah, that website again, mindfulsportsgroup.net. And yeah, thanks again, B, for coming on. It's a treat to catch up, and looking forward to teeing it up with you soon as well, brother.
I'm only going to say that at some point you've got to turn the interview chair around, and I think someone's going to ask you questions, because you are I want to plug your grip. Your grip is the envy of the world, and no one holds a golf club as well as Cam Lindsay. I think that's well known in my circles. Like, your whole game is just so good, and I'd love to hear how you approach playing golf as much as I'd like to hear anybody else. So I think that you've definitely got to get in the hot seat at some point here, because we all want to hear your thoughts as well.
Appreciate that, Pete. I'm gonna probably have to cut that out at the end. We can't have too much air in my tires, but yeah, maybe one day we'll flip the script and maybe you'll interview me or Channel interview me, and we'll go the other way.
100%. But thanks a lot, Cam. I really appreciate it, and I wish you guys all the best. And this is a really cool concept, and I think it's just the beginning for you guys. This has got a lot of legs.